Okay, you're all set. Anya, if you want to take the lead, that's fine. I'm
Okay.
sure.
Thanks. Yeah, so thank you all for showing up for this. As we discussed at the last town council meeting, I just felt like we should have a more thorough discussion of this issue because two people whose opinion I value have said we need to do something about this. And so I didn't want to dismiss that without a deeper discussion of what the issue is, what problems it creates, what the potential solutions are, and what the impediments to those potential solutions are. So if you'll all indulge me in kind of a little bit of backtracking, I think what might be useful is to just kind of go back to Denise, from your perspective, and Mike, if you're willing to chime in too, from your perspective, kind of what's the issue and why is it a problem for us? And what do you see as the solution? And then Dick, I know that you had some objection to the proposed solution, and so I'd love to hear from you about that, and then see if there's any path forward that at least partially resolves the problem, or if there just is no solution that we all can agree upon. But my goal would be to try to find some solution that we could all agree upon, even if it's only a partial solution. So does anybody want to structure the agenda any differently than that? Because I just totally made that up.
Good job.
Thanks. All right. So if not, then Denise, maybe you could just kind of restate, particularly for people who may be chiming in. I don't know if anybody is watching us from the public, but just so that people understand from the record, and if they're listening in, what it is we're talking about. Could you please just give us the brief background?
The brief background, as far as I understand it, is that when Elliot Stanley was mapping the town, he found some lots or potential lots of record. And because they were common ownership and they were deeded on one deed, they were put with a dotted line in the middle instead of separate lots.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates somewhat of a problem when we do a revaluation, or when we are looking at it to assess it. Oh, and when it's going before zoning or planning, there's times where it creates different circumstances, different issues, and more so with the planning. And Mike can, address that.
Can you give maybe a couple examples of when it presents a problem?
Mike, do you want to do that, or
Sure,
do you want me to?
I'll jump in. So from the planning board's perspective and my perspective, we show the town sort of has adopted the plat book as some official document, when in fact it's really just a representation of what's taxed. And so if a landowner has a lot of record, the surveyor will go and survey that area, and then that is what we address as a subdivision. So in reality, every dotted line division is a lot of record, and we treat it as a separate lot. And so they can be, if they're over 4 acres, they can be subdivided if they have access and septic. And if they're smaller, which many of them are, they can be merged with a larger lot, and then administratively. And so they end up with 2 lots of a more reasonable size. So I think that and I know Denise gave me an old case, or Dick revisited this or visited this in some depth way back in 2002, when the Moores were dividing their lot down by the Stonehouse, which was we represented it as lot one, when in fact it was 3 lots. And so then, as the subdivision went, it was officially made and notified or recognized as 3 individual lots. So in my discussions with Denise, and looking at the fact that we were going to do an RFP for the GIS, which would sort of document from the world all lots of record, it seemed to me to be a logical time to take a look at this. And if we wanted to recognize in the plat book and the way Denise evaluates properties, that she would look at the dotted line lots and those deeds that are associated with them, and give them a lot number if that situation warranted it. So I don't pretend to know what every deeded dotted line deed looks like.
Yep.
But at this, in combination with the reval and GIS, it would seem to me, if we were going to think about making all of these lots have their own number and be valued independently and taxed accordingly, now would be a logical time to review that.
And if we don't do that, what happens?
Well, I think the letter by Mr. Booth that addressed some of this back in 2017, from his perspective, and I can't argue with it, people aren't taxed fairly if some people have multiple lots that are taxed as one, and others, every lot of record that is developable is valued on its own. So that would be one reason to do it. But I think that that's for everyone to decide.
Right. Okay. So it sort of allows some people to skirt some tax liability because of the particular arrangement that they've had for that lot.
Correct.
Combination of lots. Okay. Denise, anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, it's not consistent. Like I tried to put in alongside some of them, I spot checked the deeds and started to start this process that sometimes, it's the legal description says it's 2 parcels, but described as one of coming together as one. And so that's why it's being taxed as one, because the legal description says it's to be taxed as one. It's legally one use, one lot. And there's other lots that don't have a dotted line, and there's deeds that say it the same way, and they're in there as 2 separate lots. So I just want some kind of guideline as consistency.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely. If you look at Denise's list there that she gave us, there are, she labels them a potential extra 182 lots that aren't valued as lots of record from a taxation standpoint.
Right. Yeah. All right. So, Dick, do you want to talk about your concerns?
Sure. So let's go to the beginning. What is a substandard lot? The substandard lot of record is defined as any lot lawfully existing at the time of the adoption of or amendment of the zoning ordinance, and not in full conformance with the dimensional and or area provisions in such ordinance. So we went to some trouble to adopt a 2-acre zoning. And that was really cutting edge at that time. There was discussions, and I've read this through Mr. Stapleton and the town council. Oddly, Mike probably remembers this, but the town council at one time was the planning board also.
Yeah.
And in 1991, they gave that up. And then the planning board became, if you will, more burdened, and the town council less burdened, and became more policy driven as opposed to seeing whose lots are being combined or subdivided, et cetera. So a number of people have substandard lots that are lawful. And one of the things that concerned me a couple of weeks ago was you wouldn't want to do this whole scale right away. And as Bob Musham was insinuating, perhaps we ought to take a lot that is 3 acres big, and they happen to have a small 50 by 50 lot attached to it. Now, that's something that this committee, the town council, Denise, whoever, could approach and say, don't you want to make that part of your 3 acre lot? The reason being is it's so small you can't possibly build on it. And then Denise or others are not left with the idea that, and as I said, Denise is pretty savvy, that that's a buildable lot. Now, somewhere in the code, and I couldn't find it today, we often use a very small standard lot of 750 square feet. I don't like that. I couldn't find it tonight, so I may be getting too old to remember it, but I seem to remember that. So, but you think about the arbitrariness of the town saying to someone, well, you have 3 lots that combined make only 1.5 acres, yet I'm going to tax you on 3 separate lots.
Mm-hmm.
That puts the town in a bind and the homeowner in a bind. And this comes up from time to time. And one of the things that many homeowners who want to do this say, well, right now I'm getting taxed as 1 lot. You're asking me to combine them. I don't want to pay the engineering fees, nor do I want to pay my lawyer for a deed. So, we can go down that path. But I think if we take tiny steps right away, which is, again, the 3 acre lot owner with a 50 by 50 lot next to it, maybe that person is approached and said, how would you feel about that? Well, what's my incentive to combine it? Well, your incentive is that the town will assist you financially with the planning board, the survey cost and the legal cost. Maybe, maybe not. But so there's another solution out of this, which is sort of the bigger solution, which is merger by ordinance. And that comes up about every 10 years in Little Compton, which we say, if 2 or more lots that are adjacent lots are held in common, where at least one of the lots is substandard, in order to meet the minimum square requirements, there will be merger by ordinance. In other words, we just do it.
Mm-hmm.
So some people might want to preserve that, but right now, we have not adopted a merger ordinance. The Zoning Enabling Act expressly allows for cities and towns to require the merger of contiguous lots in the same ownership, unless both lots are improved. In other words, you got 2 houses on 2 substandard lots, you can't do that. So, so there is a movement afoot, and I think Denise is ahead of her time on that, saying, why don't we do that? So ultimately, the way to do it is merger by ordinance. And the example we've always used is the Country Harvest restaurant that was built on 6 lots.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think that the lower lot, the lower 3 would be merged because the building spread out all over.
Yeah.
The town never really recognized that. It was the example for a while. So this problem can be solved, I think, in a very gentle, quiet way of saying, and think about the chart that Denise did for us. There's tons of lots, but some of them can be approached and say, would you like the town to assist you in merging these 3 substandard lots? Some people will say no, because I think I can still convey lot A, B, and C to my 3 sons, and that's what I want. But as we begin to have a philosophy of combining substandard lots, and that becomes part of our, not LAW, not law, but lore, LORE, and it's probably good. And if you think about it, we've got, ultimately, what drove all of our ideas about the 2 acre zoning? Groundwater purity, groundwater pollution. That's what it was. There was a movement afoot at that time to say, why not 3 acres? And this was seen as an assault on some level, the Rhode Island builders and contractors. Wait a minute, you have 3 acres, I can only put one lot on. Gee, if I'm going to buy a 10 acre parcel, that means I can only get 3 lots on there. You're going to force me to post a bond to build the road so I can do all that. It's no longer worth it for me. So the planning board has been very deft on how they handle this in terms of even driveways. You know, if you have and Mike can speak to this more, but if there's a house behind the first house, does it have to have a tarred driveway, which we don't like, or can it be gravel? All sorts of, the planning board pivots very quickly, and they've seen these situations so many times that they almost already have a intuitive response as to what they're going to do about a subdivision. And then, of course, subdivisions often carry with it the overlay of family.
Mhm.
You know, I've got 5 acres. I want to give one lot to my child, one lot hold on to. So that's sort of a vague thing. But if we start with that sort of overall idea, what are we doing? So let's start from the bottom. Let's protect the groundwater. That's good. And then, let's make it so that people can have reasonable and good septic system. That's great. And then from there on, the GIS program that Mike has talked about is kind of cool. I mean, people can correct me, but it's sort of a 3-dimensional look at a lot.
Mhm.
Kind of lifts it up and you can look at it all around. It's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Tony expressed some concern to me that perhaps these dotted lines might have an impact on that process that the town wants to go through. I don't know how that is, but I'm not disputing what Tony says because he's pretty on top of these things. So anyways, those are my thoughts.
Okay, so if I gather what you're saying, and please correct me if I'm getting it wrong, you're suggesting that we try to sort of sort the easier from the harder cases, and approach people who have the easier cases where it won't be perceived as a hardship or an affront to them, and
Right.
try to get those taken care of first. And then longer term, what would you suggest we do?
Well, longer term. So now, again, going back to LORE, LORE, this is what we want to do. Then we say in a gentle way, maybe we ought to think about merger by ordinance. Maybe we ought to think about that.
So it's kind of a 2-step process.
Yeah, and it's going to because there's a political aspect to this. So all things can be true. So, and some people it will be an affront. One thing that when we have upheaval in our town, no one's happy. People like it just to go along. So we don't want to upset the people that have put the council in office and the council that put me in office. We don't want to upset those people. But on the other hand, I mean, what are we going to do with that 50 by 50 lot? And people that own 3 or 4 of these are going to object. And they can object because we have not adopted merger by ordinance. And
So
to
you're,
date,
because we don't have merger by ordinance, we are exposed legally.
yes, but let me step back from that. Yes, you are.
Mhm.
But suing the town over that is an enormous undertaking. So it would require 10 or 15 angry people to say you're no. And so there's another kind of merger by ordinance, which is merger by use. And here's what a friend of mine wrote in the book. Suppose a city or town does not have a merger provision in its zoning ordinance, but a landowner with 2 adjacent non-conforming lots uses them as if they were a single lot, perhaps by putting a house on one of them and a driveway or garage on the other lot. Can the landowner later sell the property in 2 separate buildable lots? The Supreme Court said the merger by use does apply in Rhode Island under the appropriate facts, i.e., don't hold us to this decision because we're going to change our minds to the next one. However, the court also implied that where there's a municipality without a merger ordinance requires a landowner to gain approval of the local planning board or commission in order to divide or combine lots, merger cannot occur without such approval. So in other words, Mike Steers and Mark Cady and the other members of the board really do have some control over this. And I think they exercise it pretty fairly, frankly. And sometimes I've seen them take 3 or 4 really non-conforming lots and say, well, how about making it into 2? They're less non-conforming. And that's when I used to appear before the planning board, but for a long time I haven't because I'm on the opposite side. So there are ways down the path to do it. And I suggest that one of the things is sort of a public education. And I was kind of thinking about this, that the town should try not to be telling people what to do with their land. It should be vice versa. The person that says, I've got 3 little lots, can you help me? And eventually, if we do that regularly, then we put an ad in the kind of Times and say, the town will help defray the cost of, say, engineering. Perhaps the town decides to contract with a good sized engineering firm and says, look, the homeowner will pay the first $250 and the town will have a bulk rate for the rest of it that the town will pay. And that can encourage people to do that. So that's a very handy way. But because property rights are embedded in the Constitution, we want to make sure that we approach this in the way that the landowner wants to help us, not for us to be telling the landowner what to do. They don't like that, in my experience.
May I?
Yeah, please, Tony.
I have a couple of questions. Okay, right now, as it stands, the dotted lots, can they be assessed for taxes as they stand right now? Can Denise and Vision, the company who's doing the assessment for us, could they assess those lots right now and tax them?
Who are you asking, Tony, me or Denise?
Either one, whoever can answer the question.
I would say that legally we can do it because especially if it's come in through 2 separate deeds, people are very careful with it. We have some excellent real estate lawyers in our town and practice here. So they say, look, this parcel B, parcel A. So yeah, that's a very arguable position. And then let's assume that Denise says, I think I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna assess both of them and tax them both individually. Assuming that there are sizable enough, 2 1-acre lots, say, that could support a septic system and a well and things like that. So, and then Denise could do that. Then that person says, well, my neighbor has 2 such lots, but they're only getting taxed as 1 lot. So I think one of the things, our vulnerability is the discretion. How come that guy gets taxed at 2 lots and I get taxed at 1 lot, which is lower.
Right, but to your point though, okay, it's somewhat relevant, some of the discussion there. I would say, if right now there's a dotted line, there assigns that is a lot, and then why shouldn't Denise or the Vision be able to assess that and tax that?
Well, I mean, Denise was very candid at the upside is because Stanley Engineering made the decision that there is evidence to support 2 lots, not conclusive evidence, evidence. Okay, so the only answer to that is a title search that says no, this is 2 separate lots. He acquired lot 1 in 1967, lot 2 in 1969. Mm-hmm. And as you can imagine, Tony, there are many, many examples of that.
Right. And to your point, you're suggesting that the town incurred the cost. Who benefits from that? The town or the individual, the landowner?
No, I said the town incurred the cost to encourage it if the town wants to encourage the mergers. Okay.
Right.
I don't know if politically the town wants to do that. The town might take the position.
Can we put the political side aside for a minute, please, and stay with the legality here? Okay. With that being said, though, okay, because I don't see how the town benefits from that. The folks do. I understand about the merger, but technically for the town to incur a cost, I would say that should not be in our buck. It should not be on our backs.
So if that's the way to do it, if you don't want to do that, You don't
Right.
want to encourage people to do that, to assist them financially, because we've been through this many times before where the people said, happy to do it. I don't want to pay for it. Will you pay for it? The town generally says no. And that is a typical position of Little Compton, which frankly I agree with. But if the town wants to encourage the voluntary merger,
Right.
then it has to be some incentive.
Okay, so to the point initially, let's take this carefully. I agree 100%, even 105%. However, I think it was tried back in 2013, if I stand correct. There was a letter that was sent to all of the individuals in town, not being selective, but to everyone. They had dotted lines and say, okay, here's our intent. If we forewarn these folks to say, okay, we are on the assessment year, we are asking you to consider merging your lots, okay, or at least come in to discuss that with the assessor, okay. That's the approach I would suggest. And by the way, it's not my idea alone. I've picked somebody's brains today, Carol and Denise's already. We've had that conversation a bit. And it appears that would probably be the wisest thing to do is let's go right across the board, send out a letter, forewarn them, well, maybe not forewarn, maybe that's a little tough of a word, but just sort of, notified, okay, these folks that we are in the year of assessment. We're trying to clean up the maps, in order to plug them into GIS. And we're looking for your cooperation here. So what is your wishes? Do you wish to merge? If you wish not to merge, then you'll be assessed the full value as a lot.
That is roughly 90% of what was done before in 2013. And as I recall, there were a number of people that said, love to do it, I just can't afford it. So, and to my knowledge, and I'll have to refer to Denise, I don't know that we ever said, okay, we're going to change now and tax you on 2 lots. I don't know if we got through that. Remember, Denise has been with us for quite a while, but we had other assessors beforehand.
And
Right.
So-
the cost that they have to incur, that's because they have to do a full resurvey of the property, I take it.
Yeah, they have to do a survey, and Mike will tell you about the different classes, class 1, class 2. I can't really remember the difference, but and then one's more expensive. And then, of course, there's got to be a deed that now matches the lot.
So they have some legal expense as well.
Yeah, so
But if we had a merger clause, Dick, or a merger ordinance, and they could just record that, some other cities and towns have done that and
Right.
given up the fact that it's not 2 lots, it's 1 lot, and record that. And the other cities and towns I spoke with, they waived the recording fee, and it doesn't really cost them anything except to write that they don't want to do that anymore, and we'll record it. And we just erase the line.
I don't know what other cities or towns have done, but you're correct in terms of, yes, do we want a merger ordinance? And if that's the answer, we have raised it several times, and it's been a vote of the council. Respectfully to Tony, he's asking for legal advice, which is fine. But political decisions were made by the council when this has come up not to do it. Maybe this is the time to do it.
I guess,
Let me-
oh, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
It seems to me we need a little more definition. My recollection from the letter that we sent out was for substandard lots, as Dick points out, that were, I'm going to say, in the plat book, for lack of a better term. Whereas the dotted lines, well, I mean, if you think of the town, everything before 68 was a substandard, not everything was a substandard lot, but there are a lot of substandard lots in this town. And they're the ones that are 30 by 90, and we deal with them in the planning board on a regular basis. The dotted line lots, I sort of view as sort of invisible lots, because you have to look at in the plat book and you'll see a numbered lot and there's a dotted line in it. And that is a clue as to, well, something happened there in the past. And it isn't until you really research it to look at the deeds to discover what the justification of the dotted line is. But my recollection from a pushback standpoint, when we sent out the letter, we were asking them to merge. The town subdivision regulation calls for a class 1 survey for an administrative lot subdivision, which would be needed for combining. And that was, $1,200, I'm going to say, or more, dollars to do that. And it just was an unfair burden on the people, and they caused a lot of objection. And so we just sort of dropped it at that point. But this,
I agree. I agree, Mike.
I'm trying to differentiate between dotted line lots, which I kind of view as invisible lots, and substandard lots, which we've been dealing with, and the forced merger is a much more complicated activity in my mind. I wasn't thinking of forcing any mergers. I was just thinking of identifying these dotted line lots that the planning board treats as a buildable lot. So even though it doesn't have a number, it has a deed, surveyor brings it in, and if it's over 4 acres, they can subdivide it. If there are 2 of them that are 1/10 of an acre, which we have, we're happy to combine them. So whatever, but it's a different kind of lot.
Mike, if I may, when you're saying a class 1 survey, is it necessary for the dotted lines to have a class 1? Could a class 4 do it?
Well, there is no, if they come in for a subdivision, they
Right,
have to have a class 1 survey to do a subdivision.
understood. But to merge these dotted lines, okay, if there was a request for some sort of a survey, could a class 4 do it rather than a class 1?
You not according to our subdivision regulations.
And there might not even be a requirement for a survey. Is that right? Is that what you're saying,
Well,
Mike?
there's no requirement, I don't believe, to identify it. I mean, there's a deeded space for Denise to recognize that with its own number, because we have lots of substandard lots
Mhm.
that don't have class 1 surveys that we identify as property.
So you're suggesting we need to be very careful about focusing, if we are creating some policy around these, focus on the dotted line lots and not implicate other.
Yeah, in this activity, I was not thinking that we would try to merge anybody's property. I was just trying to identify it for the purposes, for taxation purposes, and also for visibility when the planning board, everybody knows what we're dealing with.
Well, like Mike said, sometimes, he treats them as separate lots from a planning board perspective, but they're not being taxed as separate lots.
But they are legally identified. They're deeded as separate lots from a subdivision standpoint, for a transfer taxation standpoint, the town. These are legal lots of record, as I view them.
And then we have some deeds that say that they're combined, even though they're separate parcels.
Denise, I know that there are a couple of deeds that you had on your list where it describes a whole. And so there may be a couple out there where people over the years have started to describe them differently. But I still see a number of those deeds that still say this is parcel A, this is parcel B. They refer to it as lots of record, not just lot of record. So you have to be really careful, and that's where this could get very expensive if we were to insist on title searches for each one of these instances.
Well, that's why I'm saying that something should be done, because like the one I have that was just looked at today, it says meaning to convey 2 certain lots. And they go on to describe them in a plan book, and then they say said lots E and F together form one parcel bounded and described as follows, and that's how it's described on the map. And so it encompasses the legal description encompasses the one big lot, and then there's one little dotted line in there, which was lot F. So it's saying it's one lot. It's saying that these two lots, were on this plan, but now they're these one lot. So this should be one lot.
That type of instance, the dotted line shouldn't be on the map for that.
That's what I'm saying. There's tons of them like that, not just a couple.
I wouldn't say tons, but I haven't looked at every single one of the deeds that you've referenced.
Yeah, the ones that I say on there, I just pulled a couple, and it says no dotted line needed because those are the same type of descriptions like that.
Yeah, you have to be very careful, and I don't want to belay this, but
Right.
it must say the exacting language that needs to be said to make it known that their intent was to combine this into one lot. Just simply saying described as and describing the whole does not mean that they intended for it to be one lot, especially if they describe it as parcel A and parcel B. It's a fine line, and the title companies will go all over this. So I'm very concerned in that sense. I think, and I'm not on your committee, I'm just opening my 2 cents here. But
It's very valuable, Carol.
it just makes sense. If you're going to do anything, you have, in my opinion, 2 choices. One, to just label them all with numbers, assessors, plat and lot numbers, and write a letter to people saying we're now going to recognize because they're on the books as a lot, and please come and talk to us if you want to continue being taxed as a single, as you have been since 1982 probably, or you pursue the merger ordinance and you go down that route. Or, well, there's a third option. You do nothing and you continue the way that we are. And one by one, they get settled as they either come before the planning board or somebody sells off the lots.
Right. So my concern is maybe I'm getting too hung up on this, but I think anything that is kind of a, let's take it case by case, let's not have a policy is, I don't think that ambiguity serves us well.
Well, honestly, that's what we've been doing since the early 80s, when the assessors at that time made a choice not to tax them individually.
So Dick, what would be the problem with doing what Carol just proposed in the first choice? Label them all with numbers and say, come see us if you object to this.
First of all, there would be no problem doing that because it's notice, which is the most important thing. That's fair. This is what we intend to do. And if you object, let us know and tell us why.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because, but I think in order to do that, we should probably adopt a merger ordinance, because someone's going to say, what gives you the authority to do that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So now we've made a very big club, and we don't want to swing that club quite yet, I think.
Is there any value in gathering information, even if they're going to say to us, you don't have the authority? That would help us sort of gather information about how much opposition will there be to this, and then we know going into an ordinance whether it's a huge deal or a medium deal or a small deal.
That's a fantastic idea. The more information we have, which is all public, obviously,
yep,
that's a great idea, because now we say, what are we really talking about? For example, some people want to see it in a tax revenue aspect. How much more taxes could we get if we tax them all individually, or we'll combine them? We don't want to be in a position that we treat some people differently. That's all. But I can sense Denise's frustration, and it is valid. But you're right. So if we were to get the painting of what we have before us, that's a really good idea. And then we have the information.
Okay. So I'm not sure I could turn that into something I could take back to the council and say, this is what we recommend, but I think we've got the germ of something there. Denise and Mike, how do you feel about that idea that we sort of, it's sort of pulling them out of the woodwork, I guess, Right.
So I think that if you put a number on everyone and wrote a letter to everyone, that you're identifying it, and if they have objection or concerns or whatever, that they speak with Denise about it.
And then we kind of get a sense of just how big of a, what storm we're creating.
Correct.
That's fair. Very good idea.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Denise?
Well, I think sending a letter would be great, but I think if we had a way after that to their concerns and what they can do to either merge them or, I'd have to figure out what the taxation would be on each individual one and what they, would be incurring as far as an expense at that point. I mean, it'd be nice if we had something when they came in with a solution for them,
Yep.
Mike, I don't know the law well enough. Do you know if they are required to go before the planning board with a survey in order to merge these types of lots?
Well, I think that the other towns, the councils has passed an ordinance for that specific purpose.
Yeah, but without that, I mean, given how our ordinance is written now,
If-
we
if-
do ask that they bring a survey in. But
Yes,
it is, and maybe Richard can answer this one. Can the town waive the survey for these particular lots to allow somebody to combine them on their own voluntarily if they choose to do that by deed?
Well, so then I think logistically, the step would be that someone, and I know there's no eraser, but the town says we're just going to eliminate the dotted line. So therefore, you can be assured that from now on, we're going to tax you only on one lot. That's a start, but I'm missing something there, which
Well,
is,
that isn't what I asked.
okay,
If we send the letter to the people
yep,
saying that we've issued these plat and lot numbers to all of these lots because they're lots,
Right.
and ask them to come in to talk about what they may or may not want to do with them. They may say, okay, fine, I'm going to be taxed for 3 lots now. But they may come in and say, no, I've only been being taxed for 1. I would prefer to keep it as 1. How do I do that? Is one option, or could one option be that we waive somehow locally the requirement for them to have a survey and allow them, without a merger ordinance, to then combine those lots through a deed by putting a deed on record?
with a survey.
No, without
You
can
say
we
without.
waive a survey in these instances? Can we waive that requirement? Taking that burden of $2,000 to $5,000 off of their plate.
When we tried to do this in 2013, we did not come up with an answer for that. I just don't know. I haven't really researched that. Can we waive it? Because you're right, Carol. That is the stumbling block. People find out it's going to cost them some money. They say, we don't want to do it.
So
Can they waive it?
I was just thinking that the regulation, the subdivision regulation calls for that, we could draft an amendment, if you will, or a provision that the council passed upon to financially forego the normal fee process for this unique condition where you're administratively joining lots for the purposes of someone's going to give us the legal description of
Right.
the activity, but it's an administrative subdivision, not for development. It is specifically for the land evidence records of the town to make them clear and combine questionable lots, or whatever the correct terminology is. We have the provision for waivers. So
So Dick, could you look into whether we would be on firm footing if we did that?
But it becomes a title. I'm not a title attorney. That becomes a title issue. We
Okay.
do that for the person who says, this is great. I'm getting a little older. I want to be taxed on one lot. And then then the estate wants to sell the lot. And they said, well, what happened? There were 2 lots. Well, he came in and said, please just erase the line. So I don't know. I can't give you a title opinion on that, because what I do foresee is somebody saying, a decedent say, well, I was always told we had 2 lots. Well, your parents took the idea to undo that. Now it's 1 lot. And then they said, well, how was that done? Well, we had a provision. We had the the code amended. So I'm not saying it's a bad idea. It's just a little, I don't have the answer in terms of type.
And who could give that answer?
Title company, Pilgrim Title, which
And-
we've used before.
Is
I
Chicago
think if we-
title still in business?
If we ended up writing a new deed, then that would change the title.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah, I never intended for them not to be a deed.
Right.
I was just intending that, is it potentially legal for us to waive the requirement for them to have a survey?
Potentially, yes, potentially, yes. So this is not a no, Carol. This is potentially, I just haven't figured out how to do it, because somehow there's got to be a trigger clause that says to the title searcher, this used to be 2 lots. What happened? How did this happen? Because the title searcher will take the position, there's no survey, because normally as we do a subdivision, so of course now we're doing an unsubdivision, if you will, we require a plat to be done.
So this may be premature, but I was going to suggest that Denise write something up that would be in the spirit of this in 2 senses. One, what would we be saying to these property owners? What would the letter be?
Mhm.
And then 2, sort of almost like a flow chart, if they come in, what happens? If they say, yes, I'm willing to do this. If they say no, go pound sand. And then have Dick look at that and say, is this, are we on firm footing for this? And if we
Yeah.
need to consult with a title attorney to get a better
Yeah.
sense of that. But then we sort of have like I won't say our wildest dreams, because maybe in our wildest dreams we do the ordinance. I don't actually have a strong opinion on that, but this would be sort of a middle ground where, as I said, we're kind of pulling people out of the woodwork and saying we're putting them on notice, as you said, Dick. How would we say that? How would we do it from your perspective as our attorney? Are we saying that the right way? Are we firm in that? And then how do we deal with the aftermath? And are we on good legal footing with whatever circumstances might arise?
Well, you're hitting exactly something Tony and I and Bob talked about a week ago. So what we don't want to be is the ones that are the demanders. We want to invite people to do this.
Mhm.
You are invited to do this, and the town will assist you on some way. And I don't know which way. And that, Tony was concerned about the finances, but we invite you to do this because it will save you taxes.
Mhm.
And they say, well, yes, it will in the long run, but in the short run, I'm going to pay for a survey, which is the point that Carol brings up. So that's the conundrum that that stalled us in 2013. But we can start with the invitation letter.
Yeah.
Some may say, happy to do it. We'll pay, done. And those are the easy ones. They're the the gold standard of how we're trying to do this.
But I'd also like to address this issue that Mike has raised, which is, could we waive the fee? If that's a real impediment,
I think we can waive the fee, yeah.
Okay. All right, so that would be built into the drill after the fact. And I would assume we'd do that across the board. Like, we're not just doing that when somebody cries uncle. We're doing that for anybody who comes forward and says, yes, please erase the dotted line.
Someone says, please erase the dotted line. We say that's good for us. It's more, it makes us more dexterous as we look at our plat maps. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not good for the people that are incurring the cost. And really, I don't want to really do this.
I'm not understanding. I'm talking about if we waive the cost, if we say you don't have to get a resurvey.
Right, that's correct. And so that's where we stopped before. You and I stopped before, was just, I don't know that we can waive the survey.
Okay.
Right? And the survey is so handy because it ties to the deed.
And do you have a way of researching whether we could do that?
We'd ask the title company.
Okay. All right. So is that a good follow-up plan, that sort of Denise writes up what we've just talked about as if we were going to do it? You look into the legalities of waiving the requirement for a survey.
Yeah, we'll engage the title company to do that. The council undoubtedly give me permission to do that. I generally can't do that without asking them.
Okay.
And but we do have a legal contingency fee that fund, so they'll tell us yes or no. And what they're probably going, well, I don't know. They might say, you know, it's going to be easier in the long run that we continue with the full survey, but they may not. They might say, well, we did this in another town.
Yep.
So that's the short answer and the cheap answer.
Okay.
I thought the first recommendation was that we start with just Denise putting a number on the space and notifying the landowner that we've identified your dotted line area with a lot number. And we're going to treat it as a lot. And then that will precipitate them coming in to find out what does this mean and what their options are and what they want to preserve.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Right.
And then Denise has a drill for what happens when that person comes in.
Right.
We
Yeah,
can
but I need that drill before the letter goes out.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. We should write both. There's sort of the, what are we saying to people? And then what's the plan for if they come in and object?
I think she's looking for you to draft all of that, Denise, and give a suggested action to Richard to look at.
Yeah. And then Richard looks at it and says, yep, you're on good legal footing. He talks with the title lawyers and says, yep, we are able to waive the requirement for a survey. And then we can go to the council and say, we propose sending out this letter. Here's what Denise is going to do if somebody comes in and objects. Dick has looked into the legalities of this. And I'm of course making big generalizations. We may hit a bump before we get there, but that would be my suggestion, is sort of like, let's assume that we could do all this and research it and write it out as if we could. And then once we feel firm in it, we bring it to the council. And if you're saying, Dick, that we'd have to go to the council first to have you talk with the title insurance companies, well, then we can figure out what is it we're saying to the council.
So the next council meeting, which I will be at that one, but I won't be at the second one, just on the agenda, we're considering the issue of substandard lots, and the council. Oh, by the way, we don't actually knew this because Bob and Tony have authority to engage council without council approval. Sometimes they ratify it, especially when a bill comes in.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that's what we would do, and or maybe mention it. I'd suggest that this comes out of the legal contingency fee.
Yeah,
The
or we can
council
ask
says, "Oh,
Bob,
no problem."
we can ask Bob which way he wants to play it, whether he'd rather do it in a public meeting or just,
Just do it.
Tony approve it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that sound like a semblance of a plan?
Well, the best part of the plan is that you said, let's get as much possible information as we can. And then people aren't tripping us up saying, well, no, you're wrong. That wasn't that way. Or, that's the more information you have, the better. And Denise has already done a ton of work on it already.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think unfortunately, Denise, I think this continues to require you to do a lot of case by case work, which is a drag, but we might all keep our jobs.
The counselor, I would just bring up, when we say we asking Denise, I would ask that Mike and Denise kind of collaborate on that, because Mike certainly can provide quite a bit of information that will be very helpful in the drafting.
And
Sure.
Mike, does this
That would
vague
be
plan,
appreciated.
does this vague plan sound okay to you, Mike?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Should we plan to, so the council meets next week. Should we, maybe Tony, can I ask you to follow up and figure out how we're going to handle the, having Dick reach out to the title companies and whether that needs to be on the council agenda? If it has to get on the council agenda, when would we need to know that?
By close of
No, I'll call them tomorrow. A telephone call doesn't cost any money. I just said, this is what might be coming up. What do you think?
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay,
Specific because of this matter, I would suggest that even under your prerogative, you could make a request to the council. You know, I mean, it's coming up already Thursday, so it's not like we have to wait 2 months for
Yeah.
this, you know. A report has to be provided to the council, and as part of that report, certainly, it would be a request, you know, to engage the service of, you know, not a survey, I'm sorry.
title attorney.
Title.
Yes.
Yeah, which I think Carol suggested the other day as well, yeah. All right, does anybody who's on this call have misgivings about this vague plan?
I think it's just the 6 of us. Is there anybody else? No, I
No.
didn't think so.
That's what I meant. Do any of the other 5?
Somebody may be watching it remotely, but they're not signed in.
Yeah. Carol, does this sound like a good course of action to you?
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction. It's gathering all of your information, like you said, presuming that you can do this.
Yeah.
Then you take it to the attorneys, both Richard and a title attorney, and find out if we really can do it.
Yeah.
And then bring it back to the council and say, here's our plan.
Yeah.
And they either say, yay, we like it, or
Yeah.
go back to the drawing board.
Okay. All right, then I think we can call it a day, and maybe we regroup. Well, we can't do group email because we're a subcommittee, right? So maybe Carol, you and I can figure, and Tony can figure out how to do follow-up offline.
No
Okay,
problem.
great. Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Bye.
Okay, well,
Good
we're
night.
gonna
Thanks.
declare
Thank
this
you.
adjourned at 7 p.m.
Thank you.